I'm Ruth, and I'm the director of the Board of Cooperative Ministries, and we've been offering office hours really since mid-March when we all went home. And we started out doing it 2 times a week, and we were just trying to stay relevant and stay on top of things that were emerging. And then as we hit the summer, as we hit June, we decided, and we see that we're in this for the long haul. We decided, at least for summer, we're going to do once a week office hours. And typically we just take a topic. We've done a whole variety. But this week we wanted to hear from our Aging Well team. The Cooperative Ministries has a variety of working groups and ministry teams. And our Aging Well team has worked for many years to help congregations engage their older adults in a variety of ways. And they've done that through 2 primary events. They have a conference in the spring, and they have a rally meal fellowship event in the fall. For 2020, those events are canceled, are not happening. They are big in-person events. But we did think it would be worth our time to just hear a little bit from Joy Cole and Pam Prevette, who are our co-conveners of the Aging Well team, which is made up of representatives from across the province who design the events that they do. And I know that Joy and Pam both had an opportunity recently to attend a webinar about older adults and how to help and reach these folks during the pandemic. Oh, I see Graham left and wants to come back. I'm going to add Graham back in.
There he is.
So I'm going to let, oh, and here comes another person. I'll be watching the waiting room and while we're working on this, and I'm going to let Joy and Pam talk a little bit about their experience with the webinar, the things they've learned, and then open it up for questions and comments and just a sharing of some ideas around some of the ways maybe we can better support our older adults during this strange time. So I'm going to turn it over to Joy, and you just let me know when you want me to share my screen, and I've got some slides to show from the webinar. So go ahead. Take it away, Mommy.
Well, thank you so much. Pam and I have really enjoyed being co-conveners of the Aging Well team for several years now. And our Aging Well team is a small group, so therefore we really have concentrated our time on 2 events: a fall rally, which is basically a meal and basically fellowship for the older adults in the southern province, with a speaker and a meal at one of our churches, and which Pam has pretty much coordinated for us. And then in the spring, we've been doing a 1-day conference for the older adults, offering anywhere between 4 and 6 classes of options for the older adults. And unfortunately, we've had to cancel both of those for 2020, obviously. So right now we're sort of in limbo for the Aging Well team. We did get a Facebook page set up, and we are posting articles related to the older adults on the Facebook page. Pam and I spent some time actually yesterday chatting about what the Aging Well team can be doing at this point. Pam, I don't know if you want to pick up on that.
Well, I don't know that we talked a whole lot about the team, but I did note some of my observations and some of the problems that we're facing with communication with older adults. And this is just simply based on my observation of a very large church and a very small church. The large church that has a large women's fellowship and lots of circles, it seems to me that those circles have been able to stay in touch and have, communication and different activities going on that they can participate in. Whereas the smaller church seems to not have those particular options. It was nice when we had the big events during the year because we had, a lot of communication through email with the churches, and therefore we had participation at all of those events from a lot of different Moravian churches, and that seems to be gone. I am noticing that some groups are getting together and coming up with other types of activities, such as walking. We have a group at New Hope that gets together regularly, and they walk, and they try different walking trails or different neighborhoods to walk in. So that's something that's worked. So not really sure about, how these are being filtered through the church, but there are a lot of different things going on in different churches. Would be nice if we could maybe get some of these ideas and start sending them out to the secretaries to forward that information to members by email too. What do you think, Joy?
Well, yeah, we do. Very fortunately, we do have communication with most of our either pastors or secretaries or both. So we can be doing something along that line. But we're, like you said, because of the different sizes of the churches, the big churches are streaming their services. The problem is a lot of folks my age, not Pam's, but mine, don't understand Zoom. So therefore, or don't understand YouTube, or scared to death of YouTube. So I'm afraid even some of the larger churches are not reaching the older adults because of the lack of technology skills. So that is a big issue, and actually is the reason I think why we're having a little problem with Facebook, because they don't know how to get around Facebook either. So the first thing the first slide I think from that webinar, Ruth, that that might be worth looking at is the biggest challenges. Whoops, how did we get that? There we go. They started out the webinar talking to us about the biggest challenges ministering during COVID from the pastor and then from the parishioner. And so these really hit the nail on the head. Lack of contact or communication, alleviating loneliness, which is a big one for the older adults, feeling less pastoral and less effective, unable to provide technical support, and they don't see an end. I know our pastor, Barry Foster, who is probably, I think he maybe just turned 60, has had all these years in the ministry, but yet he has expressed to me on numerous occasions his frustration of how to reach out, especially to some of the older adults who do not have the technical support. And then the parishioners, on the other hand, they're missing the rituals. Some of our churches are doing communion now. Our church is doing it in the parking lot. Some are doing a drive-through communion, but the parishioners are missing that. They're missing out on information. I know our pastor is personally taking our newsletter to some of our individual older adults who don't have computers and actually handing them a hard copy of our newsletter. They're missing, of course, others in the socialization, and they want to feel valued and missed, which is major. So, and then this thing I thought was very interesting, they don't want to be ministered to, they want to be ministered with. So let's just talk about that. Did any of these, for any of you folks, do any of these strike a bell for you, or do you have any experiences with how these are being addressed or anything like that?
And remember to unmute yourself. And I will say that these slides are, if you click the link I put in the chat that goes to the Aging Well webpage, there's links there to this the slides as well as the video of the webinar.
Well, I'll just comment quickly. We're doing the drive-in service now, which allows people to see each other. I think that's a big comfort. We're also going to do live streaming in case we do reopen. Then well, there again, the older folks could see that if they're able, as Joy has pointed out. And then we have a task force who, I don't know exactly what they're working on at this point, but they're working on being safe in case we do return. So there's a lot of variables, but things are in the works.
That's great. I know Conoke Hills has a lot of oak trees, and I just read in John's newsletter that they're doing a Bible study one evening under the oak trees. Everybody's bringing their own chair, and they're doing a Sunday school class under the oak trees with everybody bringing their own chair. And they're, can do the social distancing. So this socialization is really extremely important with the older adults. Ruth, you want to pull up the slide about loneliness? Actually, it's 2 slides. I think this is one of the major issues. I also started, after my husband died back in 12, a single sisters group for our congregation. And we started with our congregation, but we opened it to any friend who is a single sister. We have about 30 people in that group. And we realized all of us were sitting at home twiddling our thumbs mostly on the weekends. So we started doing a lot of activities on the weekends. Then I discovered that a lot of these ladies didn't get invited for holiday picnics and things like Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July. So we started having picnics on those days. So all of this has ceased. And I am hearing from some of the ladies who live alone how lonely they are. And I just thought this slide was particularly good in talking about loneliness. I don't know if you folks are aware or not, but actually with Brexit in England developed, they have a minister of loneliness for the country. And they have a 24/7 hotline for lonely people to call in to talk to somebody. So loneliness is really major, and you can see on this slide the health changes that happen with loneliness. Particularly, and I've noticed this even though I have a grandson living with me, the decline in concentrating and even memory. I tried to teach him bridge, and believe it or not, I couldn't even remember how it started. So it's fascinating how fast we do lose our memory when we aren't stimulated. So, and then the immune function, which is probably part of the reason why the older adults are getting COVID-19. And then, of course, a shortened life expectancy. So, and then there's a lot of mental health changes that come along with the loneliness. And I thought these were very interesting. The first one, and this is one I would love to give to educate family members on that have older adults in their family. They become more demanding or critical of others. I guess it's because we have more time to think and roll things over. And, they say what? The devil's advocate from just being able to think too much. And they perceive situations as more anxiety provoking than usual, or heightened anxiety. A good example of that was my brother and his wife, who are in Pittsburgh. They've been stuck with just each other, and they were invited by their son to go to the beach. And my brother has always loved the beach, but this was an extremely anxiety-provoking experience for my brother, having been sitting at home for actually, he's had physical issues, so he's been at home for quite a while. But I didn't think he was going to get through the week. He was so anxious. Hardly enjoyed the beach at all. So, so it's amazing what that plays into our lives. And then the one that really surprised me was this last one. The people who are lonely are less likely to accept invitations to social events. I just found that fascinating. because you would think if they're lonely, they would jump at a chance to socialize. So I think, anytime we're working with the older adults, we need to not take the first no with an invitation, but to go back and talk about it, or maybe even do some one-on-one. I don't know. So anyhow, I just thought those were important for us as we think about the older adults, because many, I don't know what the percentage is of older adults live alone. And so loneliness is definitely major for us. The second part of that slide, if you want to move it on, Ruth, is something I would love to get to the pastors, but this is how to address loneliness. I actually took a lot of information from this webinar and wrote quite a list and sent it to my single sisters of things they can be doing to help themselves during the shelter in place. But I thought these were interesting. Extend yourself, interact with strong and weak relationships. Never thought about relationships in terms of strong or weak. The strong relationships being family and good friends. Weak relationships are the mailman, the person at the grocery store, and what they elaborated on with this is to encourage our older adults to have a conversation with these, quote, weak relationships. Any kind of conversation is very important at this point. And then to help congregants to recognize who they interact with. And I did stress this on my letter to the single sisters, to think about who you usually just say hi to, or just even barely acknowledge, and think about asking them how their day is and having a little conversation. So I think, they need to recognize that there are other people in their lives besides family. And then, of course, we've also got the elder orphans. And that term is quite important, because we have a lot of older adults who have no one, no family, no children locally anyway. We have a lot of elder orphans, and we have a lot in our own congregations. So I've thrown this out to our congregation, or congregations before, I guess, that don't forget about the elder orphans that are sitting there with nobody checking on them on a regular basis. There's so many directions we can go with this kind of thing. And then the action plan is to encourage the congregations to recognize where they can invest their social energy. And I thought this was interesting. Social media will not be helpful. Chatting on Facebook, the only problem with chatting on Facebook is you can't hear the tone of voice. You don't see the body language, and so something that somebody might say on Facebook may be taken totally wrong, because it's just not perceived as the way it's put out there. So I think that's a real interesting point. And then the selection, creating quality relationships with those in need is really major. And I don't know that we have any current pastors. Do we have any current pastors here with this session?
Well, Barbara functions in many ways as a pastor, don't you, Barbara? I think Yvette left.
Well, I do think there, and there is another slide on what, other practical suggestions for pastors, or just any of us who are interested in reaching out to the older adults. But I think one of the ways that the congregations, the church, can be helping the older adults is to somehow get some organized relationships established. I personally am checking in twice a day with 2 older adults, every morning and every evening. Neither of them, both of them are really elder orphans, just to make sure they're okay. And we chat a little about our day. And that kind of thing could easily be set up within a congregation. And then the other suggestion they had under selection was getting congregates together who have similar interests or similar hobbies, or, you know, like a group of people who have traveled around the United States, to get them together in a small group. And that can really happen in the church when you have a group of 3, 4, 5 people. They can meet in the church fellowship hall with distancing and you know, just for socialization. So there's a lot of stuff out there that we could be doing. And then expect the best. You know, we've got to think about the positive interactions and grateful moments. And they also suggested, one congregation that was represented on this webinar said they actually sent out a little, just like one day at a time thing, or scripture verse or something to their older adults once a week. So anyhow, okay, I'm done talking. I just wanted to throw these ideas out, and ask any questions or do whatever. Pam, is there anything else that struck you in this webinar?
Those are really good ideas, and I would be interested to see if anybody else has any good ideas to share, because I'm writing them down, and maybe we can put these together in an article and get it published.
Mm-hmm.
Or get it sent out with
I was
something that people would get to.
Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe we could do some kind of a blog post on particularly the loneliness. I think information is good and helpful.
The one thing I want to point out on the loneliness is it's not just people living alone. It's the husband and wife. You know, I've got a couple friends that have a husband that doesn't talk to them, you know, and so,
Yeah.
So that's, you know, it's not, we don't need to be just looking at the single people, but older adults that are married and have no family around, that just have each other. So, yeah.
Especially there's a piece of when people have can you hear me? This is Bill.
Mm-hmm.
The Alzheimer's is a big deal. And as people get into Alzheimer's, you know, they're changing the relationship between the husband and wife radically. We have 2 families that are going through that right now. And how you counsel the wife who is dealing with the husband who's losing it, and yet still living with him, living with a stranger every morning she gets up is something else is missing in terms of their relationship. That's really good. I didn't expect anything like that as I get older. So it's really interesting to see that dynamic operating here.
One of the things in my nursing experience with the Alzheimer's patients is their memory of childhood is still there a lot of times. I remember at the last facility I worked at, they had memory boxes, and the activity coordinator cut out photos or pictures of a one-room schoolhouse, and they would pull out the picture and talk to the Alzheimer's person about, you know, what kind of school, you know, did you go to, and that kind of thing. You know, so there is a way of, you know, using the memory. The other memory that these folks have is the hymns. Yeah, they remember the words to the hymns. I had one lady whose husband told us was an atheist, and he told us not to let her go to any worship services at the facility. But we had people coming in to play the piano, and of course, a lot of times they played hymns. And this lady, who supposedly was an atheist, belted out those hymns. We loved it. But those hymns were there, and so that's also for somebody who was raised in the church. It's amazing how often that those hymns are back in there someplace. So memories are still there. If for the, I'm sure for the the late Alzheimer's, that wouldn't be the case, but or even I mean, we were the facility I worked at had Alzheimer's unit, and so they were pretty much didn't even know who what their names were, or they didn't recognize their family members. They could sing those hymns. Did you see that with Sybil at all, Graham?
I've seen it with other people. I don't remember her particularly, but we had a man, for example, who was sitting in over at Arbor Acres one time, and I watched him because there was somebody there and they were playing hymns and singing them, and he knew all the words. Well, he had directed a boys' choir. The thing that I've been concerned about recently is we do have an opportunity that these people can take part in worship on Zoom when churches are broadcasting. Home church, of course, does it every Sunday, whatever. And but we have members who don't have computers and don't know how to do one if they did have one. Mm-hmm. And if other members sometimes would maybe, if you don't want to do it all yourself, get a group that will take on somebody and go by Sundays. I think that's a challenge for some of our churches to see that their members get to participate in worship when they could through the computer. Another thing is widows and widowers. We need to be really sensitive to the loneliness that they can have. I have a woman who's recently, he was really a lot of trouble to her, but now she's really so lonely because he's not around. And her family's beginning to pick up with her, but for a while there, she was having a tough time. They've gotten more involved now, and called her on a Monday to go by sometime and see her. It was Friday before I could go by to see her because of things she had lined up for the week. So things were getting better with her, but that was something to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I do think reaching out, I think encouraging people to reach out to each other, even if it's not a phone call, even if it's just a card or, brief note, but maybe even asking them to do some of their own card writing, just to connect to some of those weak relationships, thank the postman, send him, have a little note for him, or, just something, a project basically for folks to work on, to appreciate those around them, in the work they're doing, express to friends and folks far away how much you miss them. Just that whole extending yourself. I think you really could there could be a series of little things that, you could do with congregants to have them reach out. I know Unity the board has divided up the congregation, and their board members are calling the different families. So each board member has 10 families maybe that they're responsible for. And so periodically, monthly, every other month or so, they'll call or they'll send a note and just sort of keep that connection. And I think when you've got particularly people who are already shut-ins or who are particularly isolated, maybe even doing a little bit more with them sounds like it would be worthwhile.
Sheila, what's going on at Macedonia?
Like I say, we're doing the Zooming church service, and sometimes we combine with Calvary, which live streams, and my husband, who's on the board, is working with the committee that will start live streaming. The pastor sends out a letter every week, kind of a little sermonette, I think, an update that everybody gets So that's good for folks who don't do the computer. Do you know of anything, Charles? Well, we do the drive-in service. We've started doing that now. So that would be helpful for some of our congregants who do not do the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I know of. There may be more things that the pastor could tell us, but
That's great. Well, that's the drive-in service is important, I think.
right. And I'm sure he makes calls and stuff that, of course, I'm not aware of. So if he, I'm sure he has some other things that he does.
Mm-hmm. See, Barbara, I don't know anything about you. Tell us about you.
So I'm the pastoral assistant at Raleigh Moravian, and I was just looking for some more ideas for what I could do. I can tell you about kind of the Raleigh Moravian in general. So at our next board meeting, Craig is going to be talking to our board about setting up care groups, which is something we used to have years ago and kind of fell by the wayside. But again, having board members have a group of people that they just call to check in with. Our children's minister, Van Dock, she set up a program where she matched a few older adults with kids in terms of writing to one another, but that the people that connected there are people that are already very well versed in technology, already participating a lot in other things the church is doing. So I feel like that didn't really meet anyone new. There are a couple people that have taken on sending cards to older adults, but I really like this idea of trying to make it easier for the recipients of cards to then be able to do something back, you know, whether it's write a note back. I mean, make sure they have stamps and a little pack of cards or something like that, because that's something they're comfortable with. I'm still looking for ideas about how to overcome any technology barrier. There's been a couple instances where people just don't log on. They've had to the computer. They've had family members that come and show them how, that get it all set up and just say, just push this button, and then they still either end up being like, it's just not worth it, or something happened. So that didn't really help kind of connect to them. What I do
on that point, one of the things that came out on this webinar was for churches to set up tech support buddies. You know, I mean, and that could well be a teenager.
Yeah.
My grandchildren, well, anyhow, my grandchildren knew how to do a DVD when they were 4 years old, you know, but but I thought that was such a good idea for people that they could actually call and say, okay, I'm trying to do this, walk me through it, you know. And they also suggested prayer buddies, that churches set up prayer buddies where they maybe have to call each other every couple of days to check in and see if there's something new to going on, and or just to have a conversation with somebody. But excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to tell you about tech buddies.
And maybe Ruth has a comment about this next issue. I'm going to talk about our newsletter. So we have an electronic newsletter that we send out every week using MailChimp, which is really great. It works so well for most of the people, except those people who don't have computers or don't do email. And so they miss out on the news. And the problem with that program is we've never really found a way to easily convert it into a format that we can print and mail to anyone. So it's been several years now, you know, 3-4 years that we've stopped a print newsletter. We have no newsletter being emailed, mailed. Everything is emailed. And in in the day-to-day existence of the church, it just seems like we never seem to have time to figure out how to translate that e-newsletter into something mailable. So that's kind of a frustration of mine and something I've never really quite figured out. But the final thing I was going to say was that we have a group called the Mission Council, which traditionally had been involved in, let's say, foreign mission interests. But several years ago, there had been a committee that worked on more local issues that supposedly was merged in with this group. So I'm just wondering if I can call a meeting of that group and try to and talk to them about, is there some project we can do, as that one of your first slides said, with older adults, that we can do something with our older adults that they would be interested in doing. We could say, you know, this is something that would help this project. So I'm hoping I'll have a meeting this weekend and just talk to people, see if they have any ideas about something they might want to do.
I have a couple things in response to Barbara. First, Barbara, you need to just email Hannah and have her help you, because I know there's a way I know Beverly does it with Provincial Ties, where she emails it to herself and then creates a PDF from it and prints it. It's not pretty, right? But at least the information is there. But I think Hannah could probably figure it out with you. I mean, she doesn't use MailChimp, but she uses iContact. They're very similar platforms. So, and then, you know, as I was thinking about the technology gap, you know, and the issues you were talking about, even as it relates to, they're just afraid of the technology, even when they get the help. And I realize that that's an issue, but it kind of makes me wonder, when you think about all the young people that are kind of currently unemployed, and then you think about all the old people who are not connecting, right? I feel like some of our churches and some of our entities have money that we could use to buy. We could buy. I mean, now the thing is with the, you know, a lot of folks, they have to have the internet, right? So do they even have the internet connection? How would you make sure that a person in a house somewhere had internet? But I think with enough money and a reasonable finite period of time, you make sure they have internet. You know, you spend a couple $100 for a Chromebook or some very simple, basically internet-based computer, and then you hire someone, a college-age kid or a high school-age kid. You pay them $10 an hour, $15 an hour to put their mask on and go over to the front porch and literally get them all set up. I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting, and then to be that tech buddy to sort of follow up with them. But actually, think about putting some money toward paying those kids who aren't really necessarily having any other income at this point. So there's maybe an interesting possibility there. I think about the school system having to so quickly, they had to provide computers to everybody and internet access. They were using hotspots in some places, and I know that, say, Verizon, they have those little, they're called MiFis or MiFis, or they're just basically a hotspot that you can just plug in, and it becomes the internet. So it's sort of like on-demand internet. You don't have to have, you pay a fee, but it's not an outrageous fee.
And what is that called again?
Well, like Verizon, they call it MiFi, MiFi or MiFi. I don't know how they.
Okay.
It.
I hadn't heard of that.
I used to, when I would, early on in my days with Cooperative Ministries, I'd go to churches that didn't have internet. I mean, nowadays most churches do, but so I had a MiFi and I just carried it with me. And then when I'd get to a church that didn't have internet, and I would just plug in my MiFi and have internet. So. It's a handy little portable thing. Some communities have free Wi-Fi or have grant programs that offer free Wi-Fi for income, restricted people. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting thought. So,
do you know anything about Marco Polo? An app?
Say
Marco
more about
Polo.
that.
That was mentioned on this webinar, and I meant to look it up. And but it's, I don't know, they suggested a Marco Polo app for the older adults. I don't know what that was.
It's a stay in touch app.
Yeah.
So it must be something that allows you to easily connect. I don't know how it's different than, it says it's easier than texting. I guess you can send video messages to each other easily is what it looks like.
That was one of the things that came through on the people that were watching the webinar. So, yeah.
Well, and I mean, even, you know, a lot of folks, even if they don't have internet in their home, if they have a cell phone, if they have an actual smartphone, you know, then they can get on Zoom, they can watch YouTube. I mean, they can do all the things with their phone. It's not as convenient. I mean, I have two 23-inch screens right here. You know, so it's not quite as convenient, but, you know, but just to teach them or create cheat sheets, pay somebody to create some cheat sheets for iPhones or for whatever. You could do a little survey of what your folks have, what technology they do have, and then help them adapt it. I mean, I think it's going to be a while. And yeah, I feel like people are starting to get a little stir crazy now as they realize this isn't going away. It feels like we have to double down on how we can help people feel like they have ways to be connected.
Bill, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, both of you are stirring me a little bit here in terms of putting my 2 cents worth in. Part of the reason I wanted to participate in this was mostly to observe and hear what you had to say, but I just find this fascinating, what you're providing in terms of the structure that you're providing out of the slides that you've given here. And I'm living in a retirement community now, or over 50 community. I guess that's considered retirement nowadays. But but I find that not everybody knows each other that well, and none of them are churched, you know, as far as that goes. And I've been looking at the idea of being able to put little fellowship groups together, or even just, you know, not just book study, but book clubs, but also Bible study type clubs and things like this. But the one thing that I find in this little community is that it provides an opportunity here to get to know each other better that they don't otherwise have, because some of them, their children live far away. They don't really have a way of socializing in the group that we live in right here. And I think that somehow I feel obliged me and my wife both feel obliged to somehow help to create a little bit more socializing that could or could not have a Christian basis to it. And as you start talking to some of these people, it comes up that way. And even as we got into this coronavirus stuff, I have some note cards that I made up, you know, from some of my artwork. And as everybody was starting to feel pressure from this, and especially on Good Friday, I passed out to every neighbor. We have 50 homes in the neighborhood. I passed out 2 cards, one that you can keep for yourself and one that you can send a note to somebody else. And the whole idea of having note cards or cards that you can distribute and even encourage people to write to your neighbor. A number of people even commented to me that they're so glad I sent them 2 cards because they wanted to go ahead and start a communication going with somebody else. I've got to give some thought to these things that you've been bringing up here, but this whole idea of minister to the loneliness is fantastic. The tech support, I have a tech support buddy, if you will, a gal that is probably 23 years old, and she knows her stuff, and I have no idea what I'm doing with this. And both Sarah and I, you know, call her, and all sorts of anxiety. She's more friendly than even the people at the Apple store in terms of how to help us get over it without being too much like total fools in what we're doing here. So it's that sort of stuff that these people can, I think, be able to provide us some inspiration, some direction with, and that too is, unfortunately, I think, is going to become the new norm, having to link up with each other through a computer instead of linking up in face-to-face conversation, at least in the near future.
Does your community have a activities coordinator?
No,
Oh,
no.
interesting.
It's just a small, it's not actually formal senior citizen group. It's just
Right.
it's just a group of houses here, but it was originally built for the purpose of 50 houses built, for the purpose of getting student senior citizens.
I have several friends in a community group, and a book club really is one of the most popular ones. The travel club and the book club are two of the big ones where they, have really gathered together.
Yeah,
So,
and also a book club for men as well as for women.
exactly.
A separate club because the men's interests are different than what the women's interests are.
Right.
Some of the that you choose to read. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, is Cindy on? I see her name. Must not be.
I'm here. I'm Cindy Daggett. I'm an
Hi,
elder at New
Cindy. Tell us
Philadelphia.
about you.
Well, I am serving on the regathering team at New Philadelphia. I'm serving as a member of the Board of Elders. So this is a topic that we've talked about a little bit in our team. And I just thought I would tune in today to see if I could come up with some additional ideas to what we've come up with as to how to serve our elderly members. It's a very difficult topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm not sure that we're doing anything other than the ideas that I've heard today so far, but we're going to try to see if we can come up with something else. I mean, I've been thinking about how can we actually get the older community more connected, because they're going to need to be connected electronically for all their communities, not just their church families.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the way we're all going to have to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And even
I missed what congregation you're with, Cindy.
New Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and even as we open up, assuming eventually we will be opening up, for folks who are older, they really don't need to be coming out as quickly as others.
And we should not be encouraging them to come out. That's a very big concern of mine, because there's a huge fracture within our church of people who want to come back yesterday and people who would love to come back but are very hesitant for their health reasons. And I think we have to be very, very careful as we start reopening our churches to some indoor activities that we don't make people feel pressured to come when they really should not.
Right.
So
the one thing I'm finding with my single sisters, which just I can't quite understand, is that so many of them are so interested in going out to the store for 2 items or having a family gathering, and they really are not comprehending the seriousness of the virus. I'm a bridge player, and I have friends who are playing bridge around a card table with no masks. And not only are they playing bridge and handling the cards, but they're snacking. So they're eating, they're talking, and they're sitting around the card table. And this is just blowing my mind that these intelligent women that, are just ignoring the mask and ignoring the social distancing. And I'm afraid too with the churches that these same people, it's basically, to me, what I'm seeing is it's basically about decision making, and in the older adult isolation really affects decision making. Decision making is one of the major stimulations of the brain, which is why they say playing bridge, really keeps you from getting Alzheimer's, because you have to make decisions all the time when you're playing bridge. And I remember when I was teaching my aides in my nursing home experiences, I would tell them, get these people to decide what necklace they wanted to wear, what blouse they wanted to wear. Any decision like that stimulates the brain. So my little single sister friends who are sitting at home by themselves and not making many decisions these days are, I think, losing that decision-making quality So that's one thing I sort of wanted to warn everybody about is, some of these people are socialized. I mean, my bridge friends are all, extroverts, and most of them. And so they're anxious to get with their friends, and the heck with the masks. So we got to also I think we as the church leaders will need to be sure when we do something with a group of like that together, that we be sure and talk about distancing and the masks. And the only way you can come is to wear a mask, and because they're not going to do that without being reminded, I think. So it's really very interesting for me to see this.
I'm fearful that we're going to have some frightening situations in some of our churches, because those people that you're talking about who are playing bridge will be the first ones to line up to come to church.
Yes, exactly.
And so if we're going to have an outbreak within our church community,
Yep.
It's going to be the people who are the first ones who go back to church when we open the doors. And I just think that's really very terrifying.
Yep, it is. It really is. Yeah. Well, Ruth, I think there's one more slide that just sort of maybe sums up some of what we talked about today, called the practical suggestions. It's I think towards the end of that. Just to, yeah. Other practical suggestions, older adult advisory group in your congregation, to give the seniors an agency, might be something, since we're realizing this is not a temporary situation, but one that's going to at least go through the end of the year. That might be worth getting something like that together within your own congregations. Seniors, reaching out to seniors. And then another thing they suggested was for the seniors to ask them to document their stories, to record, even doesn't even have to be a video, just to record their life stories. It gives them something to do, and it helps them with their memory too. And then, as we talked about, sending a transcript or bulletin of the service, and of course the social distancing activities, insurance of steps being taken for safety since the anxiety level is high, and then a prayer line or prayer partners. That can be organized in a variety of ways, and the technology support, feeling connected, physically mailing instructions on the access or having tech buddies, and then staying connected somehow or other. So those are all suggestions that that strategies to help us with connections. Anything else anybody wants to mention? I wanted to mention one other interesting sidebar, and that is the term ageism. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that term or not, but it's parallel to racism or whatever ism. And it is actually, I think, one of the slides in this presentation. You're going to give them the whole website to look at, right, Ruth? But we actually, for our conference in April, we're going to have a registered nurse talk about ageism. And it's just a fascinating thing that it just sort of has built up over the years, and we don't even realize it's there. But it's just stereotyping age. And it's kids, they say, absorb aging stereotype. And then all of a sudden we're in that age, and we, as the older adults, also are very much into ageism, Well, Mom always said as you got older, you're going to start having those aches and pains, and you're not going to be able to do this, and you're not going to be able, that's all ageism, And so that's a whole different ball game, but I just wanted to throw that out at you. Because that does play in the whole thing. Even the fact that, when we started out with the COVID virus, they were saying it's the older adults that's going to die. And of course, we've seen that change. And now I think yesterday I heard the average age is 36 of the people who have the virus, and these younger ones are dying. So, they said on the webinar something that I thought was very interesting, that the mentality, I guess is the word I want, of ageism for an individual actually shortens their life by 7.5 years. I mean, just thinking, oh, I'm old, Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. But ageism is a fun thing to look at and address, actually.
Well, maybe we can have an office hours in August and talk about that. Well, I am aware of our time and I want to keep it to an hour. So I want to thank Joy and Pam very much for sharing with us today. We did record this session, so at some point we hope to have it available for others as a resource to other congregational leaders. And I did want to let you know, if you've got your chat open, just to click that chat button on the right. I did post several links. I posted a link to the Aging Well team's website on moravian.bcm.org. I posted a link to the Aging Well team's Facebook page. I posted a link to Marco Polo, the app that you actually recommended, which looks really interesting. We might have to fiddle with that and see how that works.
Yeah.
And then I also, when Bill was talking about small groups and Bible book studies, I just wanted to let you all know, in our e-news today, we listed we have 4 groups coming up for summer. We're calling the Summer Connect groups. And that's for anybody in your congregations or wherever you are who wants to join us. You have to pre-register, but we're offering 4 studies starting in July, and then we hope to have a couple more starting in August. 2 are related to racism. 1 is about the church's response to racism. It's a book study called The Color of Compromise with Reverend Dr. Neil Ruth. And then 1 is, it's called Okay, White People, What's Next? And it's really more of an individual look at what do I, as an individual white person, supposed to do here about racism? And that is Tina Spock, who's from New Philly, Cindy. So she's got some anti-racism training, and she's going to be offering that. And then Riddick Weber is going to do something on what are we learning right now during the pandemic? Like, what are we learning as individuals, as groups, as a society, as a global community, as the church? So that ought to be fascinating. Everything Riddick does is always fascinating. And then I'm doing a study on the Enneagram and spirituality, helping people explore their Enneagram type and ways that they can use it to increase self-awareness as well as their spirituality. So that link in the chat takes you to the descriptions and links so you can sign up for those offerings. And they're all 4-week sessions, and they will be recorded and available at a later date as well. So I just wanted to make you aware of those things that older adults could do if they're connected to engage the brain a little bit. So so thank you all very much, and if there's nothing else, we'll head on out the door. Good to see everyone.